Portion of the Omni-cast has been brought to you by Joe Mama's Coffee. If it's got the Java, it must be Joe Mama. Also brought to you by Try Hard Trampolines, able to lift your mother-in-law on the first bounce, guaranteed all your money back. Now, back to the Vic Venom Show, currently in progress. Thank you. Welcome back. Oh, there you are. I was starting to wonder where you were. I'm glad you were able to get my message. Thank you for tuning back into the Omni-cast. Well, let's get back. Oh, you didn't know who I am. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Vic Venom. You can call me Venom or Vic. Don't call me Vicky. I don't like that. It annoys me. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that tonight's portion of the Omni-cast has been brought to you by Joe Mama's Coffee. If it's got the Java, it must be Joe Mama. Also brought to you by Try Hard Trampolines, able to lift your mother-in-law on the first bounce, guaranteed all your money back. I should know. I was able to use it on my ex-wife and her mother, a 2-for-1. Definitely an endorsement from me, fella. And that's why I was also divorced. But we'll move on anyway. But I'll just say this. The look on her face was absolutely adorable. She really thought she got... Anyhow, a while back to the matter at hand. I was going to talk about something very intriguing that I came across earlier in the Omni-cast, but I didn't bring it up until just... Oh, right now. Thank you. Did you know that American literacy is basically facing a crisis? As the reading comprehension levels for people in the grade system, essentially from K to 12, by and large, somewhere in the 4th to 10th grade. Well, literacy, about 40% of all students are able to basically not read on that level that they should be at. It's basically underneath their reading and writing comprehension. Big words and letters. Now, you might be thinking, well, there's 60% left, because, 6 plus 4 equals 10, so we add an extra 0 to it. That would be percentiles. Yes, very good. High marks for you. Well, unfortunately, it turns out that of that remaining 60%, about roughly 30% are actually able to read on a on-grade level and reading comprehension. Oof. When you look at the remaining percentiles, it turns out that about 20% of those students can't even read on that level. They are functionally illiterate. And then, of course, 10 percentile are able to go above that. Go figure. How unfortunate. But it would seem that as we've moved on into the digital era, we find ourselves reading less and less literature and swiping more on our screen. Now, there's no such thing as bad information, just how you look at it. At least that's if that's what you want to tell yourself. I'm here to be realistic with you, my friend, my dear listener. You need to be mindful that there are all sorts of snakes in the grass. I'm not talking about me, but I'm talking about real wolves in sheep's clothing. And if you don't pay enough attention, you might end up being their next meal. Wouldn't that be dreadful? And I so would hate to read your obituary here on television, as they were also involved heavily in the disclosure of the details. But we won't go any further into that. We'll save that for the news anchors of later on. But back to the matter at hand. Fun story. I actually used to use video game manuals to learn how to improve my reading skills. Basically, back then, we didn't have a whole lot. We didn't actually have... Online wasn't a thing back in the 80s, even though it was around since at least the 70s. It didn't become a thing until much later, where the technology became more affordable. Now, for those of you who never grew up in the days of dial-up internet, that basically meant you had to go on your phone. You mean you had to actually forfeit meaning giving up, the ability to use your phone to make phone calls, to go online. Now, Going online back then was very different from now. The new engines being utilized to index the internet. One up startup was called Google, and it's somehow making a huge splash, as it's also one of the largest indexing websites in the world, and is also being brought into scrutiny for antitrust bans, ended up making the search engine essentially useless. But that's just my opinion. Let us move on. Also, fun fact as we go into other things. In other news, Countess Elizabeth Bathory of Assis has seen her last sunrise as she was found post-mortem in her sleep. Hopefully, she's able to. A great war where she attempted to bring back from the great beyond, that was, her alleged relative, Vladimir Tepish III, better known these days as Dracula, where the Grim Reaper has once again been summoned by the Lord of Darkness to obey. And now poor John Morris, son of Quincy Morris, for if you know, you know, well, left with his family keepsake, the vampire killer, to, with any luck, bring a prompt stomp to Dracula and Countess Bathory, since he's the Morris family is distantly related to the Belmonts of old. Quite interesting what you can learn when you look into a little bit of history. Also, for the record, if anyone from KDKA post meaning after, that is, the date of October 7th, 1920. Don't mind me. I've been here the entire time. You must have simply forgotten I was here. I'll try to make a little more noise so you won't forget about little old me. All right there, dear listener? Excellent. Let us continue, shall we? Later on tonight in the Omni-cast, we find out who fooled around hard enough to find out. Spoiler alert, it wasn't you this week. Isn't that lovely? But I digress. Digress meaning to go too far off topic. I suppose you could call it a sort of tangent. You know, an indirectly related topic. A good example would be when I was able to relate my spider hobby to the Capcom video game Mega Man X. It was a spin-off of the original series meant to be taken in a more mature type of storyline, as it was seemed to have some appeal with the teens who found it quite fun and loved the game's evolutions and higher fidelity graphics. This was when the bid wars began to form into a thing during the 80s and 90s. Since I like you so much, dear listener, I'll share you a fun fact with you. You know, the jukebox was invented in 1927 by American inventor and engineer Otto Frederick Rohwedder. It certainly had some good tunes to play on, and when the good times were rolling in, everything was so admirable. But we always have the best of friends to always rely on to always be there for one another, and I'm always the most benevolent friend. Benevolent meaning loving or kind. You really are too hard on yourself, dear listener. Try to take a steady breath and calmly get up. I said get up. There we go. All better. Shall we move on? Oh, we're going to have to go to a quick break. We'll be right back after more of this after a word from our sponsor.